Title: Art Beyond Sight, Bringing Art and Culture to All. Opening the Digital Doorway. Leveraging Technology to Build Inclusive Museum Experiences. The Morgan Library, October 22, 2014. Joya Musa, Teacher of Students with Visual Impairments. Strategies for Providing Access to the Arts.
All right, so I am a teacher for students who are visually impaired, and just to give you an idea of what that means and what that role is it's my job to teach specialized skills that students need in order to access the curriculum. For instance, using a computer without a mouse, or learning Braille and technology, developing their self-advocacy skills, and working on skills for independent living. And then also a big part of my role is to adapt curriculum so that students can experience it. And it may be creating a tactile adaptation, an audio adaptation, or conceptual. So I've had a lot of experience doing that. And then because I'm a TVI, I get to experience touch tours and video description and audio description, and it's a lot of fun. So just to explain a little bit about what is a TVI. Also, I was thrilled to be a part of this because I was a tour guide at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis for 5 years. So I apologize if there's too many references to contemporary art in this presentation. It's sort of my background. I get really excited about it. And then I'm also on a consumer advisory board for a video description company, Caption Mac. So I spent a lot of time thinking about ways to make things accessible for students. And I'm just curious, so this group, you're from a variety of museums, not just art museums, correct? And
yes.
Okay, and representing all different departments. So hopefully we can make it general. Feel free to ask lots of questions because, well, a lot of the pictures here are visual art. For examples, any TVI has had plenty of experience adapting natural history assignments and geography assignments and kindergarten experiences. So we have a lot of, so feel free to try to ask me questions to make it more relevant to you. So the keys to working, I guess Ibrahim asked me to talk about methods for working with students who are visually impaired and just general approaches. So really, the number one approach I think that we all have learned in this society is you just can't assume anything anymore about anyone. So there is so much diversity, and I've never had one student who's been the same as another student in their vision. Even though I've sometimes had siblings with the same diagnosis, their vision is different from each other, their experiences, their interests. So we just have to expect that diversity and always address the individual who's in front of us. And then always, it's really important for us to just strive for equal access to visual information or information in general. I really believe that we can make it accessible. You have to believe that, because sometimes when you're presented with something, it's not always obvious that you can make it accessible, but you have to believe that you can in order to make it work. And then, yeah, I guess that's something else that I think is good to keep in mind is that in society, individuals are subjected to many different stereotypes and myths and reactions around blindness and visual impairment. And I just think it's wonderful what the museums are doing now to create an expectation that museums can be experienced by all students, and that I think it's setting a precedent. Our students have different experiences in this realm too. Some of them come from families where they really believe in empowering the children, and some don't. So you have to just be aware that people have, you can't generalize. So I'm going to generalize in the rest of this presentation, but I'm telling you right now that you can't generalize. That's what this is about. So we will. So what I thought I would do, just to give you some background, is to kind of explain the different types of visual impairment that people have. And like I said, I can't really generalize, but we do know that there are some common diagnoses, and there are some things that you can make general statements about as long as you understand that each individual will experience it differently at a different stage. So these are artworks created by my past and former students who have helped me to realize just how different vision can be. And, we can talk about them later. The first one, if you're wondering, is just a tactile picture of a flamingo that sneezed on a frog. It was part of a health project. So they had to create a story about not spreading germs and being healthy in health class. So this was something that she wrote the story, and then she brailled it, and then we created a tactile representation of the flamingo sneezing on the frog. And then there's some Japanese brush stroke painting that another student did, and then something that I'll talk about later. It was an attempt to, it was a 3D perspective assignment in an 8th grade art class. So all the students were doing it, and this is what we did to try to make it accessible to the student. So that's just a hint of what we do. So when we talk about visual impairment, often what's used to define visual impairment is the visual acuity. And this is a term that it means basically what line can you see on the eye chart and at what distance. That's what acuity is all about. But in more descriptive terms, you can say, well, you need to be closer to things in order to see it, or things get more blurry as you get farther away. So this is a Peter Bruegel painting of Hunters in the Snow. And this is just a representation of about 20/70 acuity. So you can see things are slightly blurry, but you can still see quite a lot. You can see the hunters, you can see the trees, you can see the skaters in the distance. These things are often accessible at the right distance. But again, the distance is the number one factor, lighting and other factors. But I'm just going to show you just a few samples of how acuity might change, because so often people say, well, what do they see? Even parents will ask me, what does my child see? And I really can't tell you what they see, but this is just explaining acuity. So this is 2200. You see things get a little bit more blurry, and you would need to be closer to things in order to see them. You see less detail. And then 2400, much less detail. And I think this presentation even distorts it even more. So again, take this all with a grain of salt. It's not what the doctor would say is 2400, but they'll admit they can't tell you either, right? So this is just reduced visual acuity. You might also look at some artists who are known to have had reduced visual acuity. Claude Monet had cataracts, and I've always thought that Impressionism makes the world, looks like my world when I'm not wearing my glasses. And this may be a more realistic portrayal of reduced visual acuity, just where you see the colors blend together, but you still have colors and details. So strategies for making any museum piece accessible to people with reduced visual acuity are to, number one, allow them to look closely. Many people can see very clearly just by moving into a few inches. I know not every museum allows you to get within a few inches, but even allowing people to hold objects, to hold them where they need to hold them in order to see them, can be really helpful. Mobile apps can be helpful for this too. I have one friend, she's visually impaired. She loves to take her iPad and take a picture of things in the distance that people are talking about, and then she can see it up close. So she can't see it by looking at it, but by taking a picture, she can zoom in and see it. So I'm not sure if the mobile apps you're developing have those visual features, but they may benefit a number of the patrons who are visually impaired. And then I'm not sure if any of you are involved in tour guides or docent training. Are any of you? Great, that's my background too, so this might be. You should always feel free to ask, what do you notice or what do you see? Don't shy away from those questions. I think many people who are visually impaired still experience a visual world in many ways, so just don't shy away from those questions. And do point out some finer details that may be missed. So you won't be asking individuals, well, what is your vision? What's your acuity? Are you 2400? Are you 2200? But if you ask what they notice, you might see that they do see the people, the skaters in the pond, and you don't have to point that out. If they don't see it, you could say that they do. And one of the reasons that I chose the Bruegel is because I just love that there are so many stories in art, and I was on a tour when I was 19, and I remember a painting, a Bruegel painting, because I learned that he was the first painter who painted snow. So, those sorts of details and context can really enrich a viewer's experience, even if they can't see the whole picture. Okay, another famous, I'm not sure, retinal degeneration is in the news a lot. There's been a lot of research on stem cell therapies for retinal degenerations, and retinitis pigmentosa is one of the most commonly discussed and talked about visual impairments, and it's a decreased visual field. So this is an extreme case of retinitis pigmentosa. Usually people start to get RP when they are in their teens, and it can progress quickly, where they are totally blind in their 20s, or it can progress more slowly until their 40s. And it may be, I have two small holes of vision on a painting right here. One of them, if a viewer with RP was looking at a painting up close, or any piece of art up close, they would just see a small section of it. They can see the whole painting by scanning. So you can see if I put the tunnel at someone else, you see this eye peering through the glasses. And does anyone know what this is? I thought it was a good. It is Chuck Close, yeah, and it's so you see this is the big self-portrait of Chuck Close that he did. I don't know in what year, but it's not very flattering. He's bare-chested and his hair is messy, and he's got a cigarette in his mouth. And when I showed this to my supervisor, he said, "I don't think you want to include that." So I didn't. I was going to give you the whole picture because if you were to. But I used a different one, so you didn't have to see that. But the moral of the story is that you can see the whole picture if you're at a greater distance. So a person with RP might see the picture better if they are farther away, maybe 10 feet, maybe 20 feet. So it's sort of the opposite of someone with visual acuity. And tour guides can prepare their groups for this by just saying we're heading over to the Chuck Close piece and just allowing people to look at different angles. And I also like Chuck Close because I feel like he paints in a very RP style. He paints piece by piece by piece by piece, just like a person with tunnel vision may need to build that picture piece by piece.
Joya?
Yes?
About 5 minutes.
Okay, sure, I'll go quickly. So then macular degeneration is sort of, blurred. Whatever you're looking at, your central view is blurry. So with macular degeneration, high contrast is much more visible than low contrast. And here's another famous artist, Edgar Degas. He had maculopathy, and I like to think that some of his paintings reflect that. You see some parts are blurry, and some parts are distorted, and some parts are very sharp and clear. And strategies we've talked a little bit about these strategies, just allow people to see them from different angles, and mobile apps can also help with this. If you can put the entire image on a mobile app, they might have more access to it than they do on the wall. Other etiologies of visual impairment are so diverse, I just couldn't possibly explain them, but optic nerve atrophies, cortical visual impairment, aniridia. I explained them up here. I've had students with this optic nerve atrophy, and no one has been the same. One student, he insisted he did not see things that were blurry. He said it looks like stick figures, so people look like stick figures. So just be aware that people experience visual images around them in an amazingly different number of ways. And hemianopsia, field loss on the left or field loss on the bottom or the right. And then, of course, we have visitors who have light perception and nothing more than that. And I like to, with my students with light perception, I like to expose them to what is art. This is a painting that I've told many students about because it was done as part of the Gutai movement, which was an art group that believed in experiencing and creating art and then destroying it because it was meant to be lived. So this was done by someone swinging on a rope and dragging their feet through paint. And it's one of the few pieces that is left behind. So just, I think, exposing visitors who are visually impaired to different ideas of art and different ways of experiencing it is really a great opportunity for you to have. And then, of course, Yoko Ono also has a lot of different ideas. I've told a lot of 8th graders about that this is not a wall piece. And she installation art, I think, has a lot of possibilities for students. And strategies for engaging visitors with non-visual approaches. I know you've done some training in the touch tours. I think they're really amazing. One thing, if you do have someone on a touch tour, encourage them to use 2 hands when they're exploring the object, because then they can have a greater sense of the space and the size. And with touch tours, you can allow people to discover things on their own. You don't have to point everything out. I mean, I think it's always nice to let them explore for a few minutes and then see what they discover, and then if there are missing pieces, fill in the blanks. And then verbal, audio, and video descriptions. I think you've received some training in this already, but just always use objective terms to convey size and shape bigger than a bread box. Or I do have a picture of the Spoon Bridge and Cherry bridge here from Minneapolis, of course. But to tell a student that it's taller than your house or it's the size of 2 trucks, to use those sorts of. And I'm just gonna. These are some examples of tactile graphics. There is a huge difference between great tactile graphics and poor tactile graphics. And the one on the left, I think, worked really well. The student was able to create it, and she was able to interpret it and tell people what it was. The one on the right, my attempt at making a 3D perspective assignment accessible to the students, he hated it so much that he left it with me, so I have it to show you today. So I mean, I guess I would encourage you, if you're creating tactile graphics for your galleries or for your museums, please do the research to find out what are best practices. Usually things need to be simplified, they need to have multiple textures, not single textures. I did bring some things to share afterwards. There's an art book that I got in Paris. It's a Picasso book, and it has a lot of raised line drawings of Picasso's art, and I would say that it's a beautiful book. I'm lucky to have it, but they're an example of the not what to do or what not to do. And then audio guides versus audio description and video description, I think there is a difference. And if you're making something accessible to patrons who are visually impaired, it has to go beyond the background and the context. You want to give people information about what they're seeing or information about the artwork. And I think I do have some resources. I could email them to you for guidelines for video description and tactile graphics and vision simulation apps. If you go onto your iPhone, the Braille Institute has some nice vision simulation apps, so you can take a picture of whatever you're looking at and see that with the different. And then just some recommended reading. I think Georgina Klieg is an amazing literary writer who describes how she sees with her macular degeneration really well, and also just talks about her experiences. So I just recommend all these books, and Shooting Blind, and I guess that's what I brought. So thank you, Annie. I hope I didn't go too far over. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Copyright Art Beyond Sight, 2014.